Hello, this is Pamela, the Divorce Mystic. I'm an over 25-year intuitive divorce attorney, mediator, and coach who's integrated a spiritual practice into my business. We're moving on today with the Chakra and Divorce Series, specifically Part 5, dealing with the Throat Chakra. The Throat Chakra is located near our throat, associated with the color blue and the element of ether. The Throat Chakra governs our self-expression. It determines how we speak in the world. When we are balanced, we speak with authenticity. We have good discernment. We speak our truth without fear of judgment. We also allow others to speak their truth without judging. We are open. We're more curious about what someone has to say rather than thinking about what we're going to say in return. We all have experienced those moments, whether we're on the receiving end of that or we were doing it ourselves. It's both our nonverbal and verbal behavior. So I'm sure you've sat in a room where somebody and spoken with somebody in a discussion, and they're leaning in, and their nonverbal behavior, whether it's a smile on their face, their body language, you feel comfortable. You feel you feel that you're being accepted by that person, and that person is really interested in you and what you're saying, and it feels comfortable. It feels home. In the alternative, when you're sitting in a discussion with somebody or in a room and somebody has their arms folded or they're showing agitation in their body movement or in their choice of words, we don't feel so accepted. We feel judged. We feel belittled, not good enough. Whatever the feeling is that triggers in us, it doesn't feel like home. It feels like we want to leave. So in a situation where you're in a life transition, such as divorce, one of the main things you have to do in a divorce process is make decisions. But in order to get to those decisions, the ability to communicate and the ability to hear from the other party are two major keys in determining the success of the process. So as an example, if I'm in a negotiation and I am afraid to speak because I'm afraid that someone's going to judge me, something that's really important to me during the settlement proceedings, I may miss out on because I'm afraid to speak my truth. And years later, a month later, it could be days later, after an agreement is signed, and I say, oh, I didn't really express myself correctly with that particular issue, and it may be more than one issue. Many people have caught themselves with an inability to truly be authentically themselves throughout the whole process. They're very meek. They're shy. They don't want to speak up. They've been taught to be to be full of manners, and in their world, what that means is we don't speak. We let others determine the topic of discussion, the tone of the discussion, and those particular clients usually end up agreeing to things that are not in their best interest because they've had an inability to put forward what is their needs, why is it something important to them, what is the interest behind it. And whether it's a child parenting plan or a division of assets or a need for support, whatever it may be, you can understand after over 25 years, there's a lot of those people that I've run into that are never able to balance, and they're never able to really truly speak up prior to the divorce being over. And once it's over, there's no going back. There's also those who are on the other end of that spectrum. Their inability to communicate well in an imbalanced situation is that their ego comes forward in a very aggressive way, and they speak without a filter. There's no such thing as manners in the room. They say it like it is. It doesn't matter if they hurt somebody, if they're disrespectful. Because when we're balanced, we're compassionate, we're respectful. We treat people differently. In this kind of a situation, imagine that same settlement table where someone is aggressive, someone doesn't care about the other party's feelings. or what their interest is in something. They just want to cram something down, whether it's an expression from anger, or it's an expression of just another way the parties communicated during the marriage. There's a lack of filter, and those settlement discussions usually end up in a breakdown. If one doesn't overpower the other, it's a total breakdown. In those situations, they end up in litigation. Or the other person is more submissive. As I said, their form of communication, when they're knocked off balance, is to be submissive and to just accept things because it's easier, or it's more in line with their culture, or more in line with their belief system. It's more in line with their comfort zone of how they deal in the world. How they deal with in the world when they are in an imbalanced state is to just go with the flow. And those people a lot of us love those people who just go with the flow. But when you're in a situation such as a settlement discussion, or a need to develop a parenting plan with your children, that is not the time to go with the flow. And it's also not the time to have a lack of discernment and a lack of judgment and a lack of filter. It's a time to be balanced, where your higher and lower self are together, meeting in the heart. So when you're talking, you're able to conjure up what really is your truth. You're able to have that filter to say, this is what I need and why. This is why this is important to me. This is the interest behind what I'm asking from you, or from this process. And when the other person speaks, you're able to hear it from a place of curiosity, not what happened in the marriage. You're right back into the turbulence of the marriage and the communication style of the marriage. Nope, you're able to stay balanced and hear that person for what they're really saying. You're not projecting anything to anybody on them, and you're able to hear their options for settlement. You're able to hear their idea for settlement options, their interest behind something, without feeling like something's being taken away from you, or fearful that if they get their way on something, that something's going to be taken away from you. Really important to keep that idea in mind, that when we're in settlement discussions, settlement itself means that we're needing to come to terms. We're needing to meet each other's interest in one way or the other. And that naturally involves some type of compromise. So we know that any time we're negotiating a contract, whether it's in divorce proceedings or something else, that there's going to be compromise on both sides, so that there's a meeting of the minds in the middle, that both parties can say, this may not be perfect, but I can live with this. And after dealing with hundreds and hundreds of settlement conferences and people in general in the divorce space, there we go into thousands. The main thing is, once people are able to communicate their truth and they're able to hear the other side without judgment, the settlement discussions take on a totally separate tone. When you're in a collaborative case, as an example, one of the things, or mediation, one of the things that's highlighted is the interest behind something, not the position. Collaboration means that I want to hear from you what your interest is, and I want you to hear from me what my interests are in something, so that we can find that meeting of the minds, that whatever we put on paper is something that we both agree to, that it's acceptable. It may not be perfect, but we can live with it. We will honor it going forward. It'll be enduring, and it doesn't hurt anybody else. And it meets, in a divorce situation, it meets the needs of the family. Whatever the agreement says, it meets everybody's needs. Because if it doesn't, it's going to fall apart. So in a situation where there is a need to compromise, there is a need to hear from the other side, and a need to be able to communicate our interest in something, it's very important to have a balanced. Not every chakra works in our favor or against us, but right now we're specifically dealing with the throat, right? So understanding that how we communicate or how we express ourselves is what is going to determine in a divorce where that divorce process lands in terms of the tone and the end result, and whether or not it's going to be something that the parties both can live with, and it takes into consideration the needs of the family, and not just taking on the expression of what normally would happen in a living room fight during the marriage, right? Because in a living room fight, you might come to a solution, but you can change it tomorrow. People don't realize that in a divorce settlement, after the divorce is settled and the divorce order is entered, yeah, you can change things. Those people who learn how to communicate in the settlement discussions, whether they're discussing it together, spouse to spouse, with their attorneys in a negotiation setting, in a mediation setting where they're with a mediator, but they're still communicating together. Those who take advantage of those processes that are more of, as we call, a gentle landing in terms of divorce rather than court, and they're able to fully express themselves. You do have time, and it's appropriate at times to be able to also, in speaking your truth, to say what was uncomfortable during the marriage. It may help you. It's just how that is expressed and then how it is received by the other party. So both parties have to be balanced in order to say something that might trigger the other party, and have the other party have it land in a place that's not triggering them to just hit back, and the communication falls apart. So using discernment during that process, and of course using our filter during that process, whether you're the professional or the clients in a room, or like I said, it's two spouses communicating. It's very important to either be totally aligned together, meaning that you're both balanced, or you use extra discernment in how you communicate a particular idea. So one story that I've used in my book that really says a lot is, I called it the Shepherd of Truth. And it happened during a collaborative session where we were almost ready to sign the agreement. It was printed out. Everybody had one in front of them. The clients were about to sign, and my client stopped the process cold. And one of the things that was relevant in their relationship breakdown was the inability to have a child. And there was a lot of emotion around that. And they had a dog, which was the husband's dog when they met, a wonderful German Shepherd. And this Shepherd was messy, and the wife didn't like it. My client didn't like it. She made comments about that German Shepherd every day, the way, it would run in from outside with mud, it would jump in the bed, it just hair all over. She just really didn't appreciate this dog. But she stopped right before signing the agreement and said, "I can't do this." And she says, "I want the dog." And of course, all of us were very well aware of her disdain for this dog. But when asked, because it was a collaborative session, and everybody was used to the idea of what is the interest behind something that somebody's saying, rather than to just, take out a hammer and beat her up with it, she said what she didn't realize is that that animal became her surrogate child that she was actually parenting. Dog comes in, wiping paws, just like a child, feeding the dog, having the dog sleep with you in a bed. All of the things that she would have enjoyed with a human child, she was actually receiving from that animal. Very interesting. That it was acknowledged, though, in time. And she said, I can't walk away from the dog. And so the husband, we were all wondering, oh no, because she made such a stink that it wasn't even a discussion. It was clear that the dog was going with the husband. So when we looked at him on how he was responding or reacting to what she was saying, the tears were flowing. All of a sudden, we all were crying. But the point is, she was able to speak her truth authentically from a place of not being guarded, but very gently saying, this is what I've realized. And she wasn't in that situation afraid that she was going to be judged. She just called it like it was. And he said, he looked at the attorneys and said, well, isn't there a way we could deal with this in the agreement? So of course there is, so we came up with, a pet custody agreement so that They both can share time with this wonderful animal. And the beautiful thing was, in the end, that made her day just extra special, was that she gets to start that weekend with the dog. So she was the first one to spend the quality time. That's just one great example of showing, hopefully demonstrating, that our throat chakra being balanced is what we need and what is required whenever we're having a communication with somebody that's important, that has an end result, that we're looking for a solution, or that we need to be honest, because we need to get our feelings out there, but we also need to do it from a place of full filters on, so that, and being able to have discernment, so we could read the other side as to whether or not they're going to be able to receive it at that moment, and how they might receive it. So how we might say it a little bit different, so that it lands well with that other person. These are skills, but in those situations where I have witnessed people learning to do that with each other in settlement discussions, because some of these settlement discussions go on for quite a while, because there's a lot of assets, there's businesses, especially these high wealth clients. There's different areas that take some time. So, and different experts that's required to get it right. And we all want to get it right. So that means there's a lot of time for these parties to be together, and having to be in the same room, and having to talk, and having to negotiate, and having to express themselves, having to hear the other side. And when you're in a divorce situation, the last thing that most people really want to do is be in that person's presence so much, right? It's still new. We have to get used to this. But what happens, what I call the blessing in all of that, is, particularly if there's children, it teaches these parties how to communicate moving forward. If I get very used to being careful what I say, not so much that I'm afraid that I'm going to anger somebody, but if I'm very careful, as say the mother in a situation, to speak my truth to my children's father on why I want to make a change, or do something different, or change days, or just the millions of potential reasons that people change, or might want to change an agreement. The other person's able to hear it differently, because they've been trained on how to hear me differently. So if you are in a situation where you're about to go into negotiations, even if your case is in litigation, you still have communication with your lawyer, and you probably still have settlement conferences that are taking place prior to trial to keep yourself out of the court. Pay attention to not just all of the chakras, or not just the throat chakra, but all of them. How do I feel? Am I speaking from a place of truth? Go into that, just like I said with the rest of them. Go into that chakra and really dig deep into that color. How deep is that blue? Can I make it bluer? Do I feel my heart connected to my higher self, to my guides, to my trusted source? And am I using proper discernment? Is my filter turned on? How am I feeling in general? Am I scared? Once you learn how to do that, and you do that on a daily basis, you won't be afraid, and you won't be timid in terms of your style, and you won't be overly aggressive in terms of, if you're on the other spectrum, that you tend to get a little harsh when you're out of balance. So pay attention to how you feel, and be able to answer the question, do I feel able to communicate well, yes to that question, before you communicate to any on anything dealing with your divorce. Just be sure that you do that. And as I've said in the other videos dealing with our chakras, go through each one, because we're now at the throat. So we started at the root. Just go through each one. It doesn't take long. And when you find that there's something that needs an adjustment, just make the adjustment. And if you find that you can't make the adjustment, then if it's possible and it's not a court hearing or something that is going to, that you have an inability to delay, just be honest. At least use that moment to say, I'm not in a place to do this. I don't trust myself. However you would need to say it, you don't need to tell them what you're doing, but you need to be able to communicate in a very gentle way. I am delaying this settlement hearing because I'm not ready. I need a couple of days, whatever it is, so that when you're sitting in that table, you know you've got this. You know that you're able to hear something from your spouse that you may not like, but you're not going to take it in terms of another argument in the living room. You're going to take it from a different perspective and be on the top of your game, energetically clear and aligned, so that you can have the control of the room. You have control of your energy. You have control of the room. So until we meet again in part 6, the third eye chakra, know that you've got this. And until then, my friend, namaste.